keep working this out. Tiff, you can hit the record button and we will start again as we are finding our way. Because, now that everybody's learning how to use all of this stuff, I realize that 8 o'clock is the bewitching hour on
It
Facebook.
is.
And so
It
that's
is.
starting to find their way over there. So ain't my fault. But here we are. Okay, but we are live and we are recording. Welcome, welcome to day 3, session 3 of the Rooted Collaborative pop-up virtual conference focused on your mind, your body, your spiritual health, on your personal well-being, and on your level up in your career and your life. We have been rocking and rolling for the last few days with some amazing speakers who have brought to you their best thinking and content about what it means to be a woman and a woman of color in our sector, getting us prepared to be able to live our very best lives. And so tonight, for our last session of this conference, before we have our hot seat for tonight, I am so pleased to bring to you Miecha Forbes. Miecha, I've been giving everybody just like a little personal color on the backstory. So Miecha and I fell in love. First of all, we are Sabras.
Yes. Hey, Sarah.
But we fell in love because she was a recruiter for a position. Wait a minute.
Yes.
Oh
It's
my
going to
God.
hit you. Yeah.
It just hit me just now. Okay, I'll come back. Okay, I'll come back to that.
Yes.
So Miecha was a recruiter for an organization, and I applied to be the executive director at that time in I was in Boston, going to North
North
Carolina.
Carolina.
And so we got to chatting on the phone that day. I didn't know Miecha from a hole in the wall. And then I made some comment about Teddy Riley. And it was
Next thing you know, we at the Wang Center, listen to Blackstreet.
in the Blackstreet. Okay, we ended up to a hole in the wall. I was like, so Rochelle, just so you know, I've been doing this to people for a really long time.
Been a
When I
long time.
in your life, like, we're gonna be together forever.
Forever. It's been a long time, girl. A long time. Okay.
And Alguma talked about people being a part of your kitchen cabinet. You have been a part of my first professional and then personal kitchen cabinet for pretty much the entirety of my career, and have been able to offer sage advice, counsel, been able to steer me away from things, hold my hand when things didn't go my way, talk to me real hard when I needed course correction. And so that's been your side hustle. I'm laughing. But in your
Right.
actually have like done that for like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and so there's thousands and thousands
Yeah,
of
we're there now.
career, and particularly Black and brown women, to make sure that we end up in roles in our organizations that are the right roles for us. So that's my unofficial tissue. I didn't tell them what your real big dog job is. And so now I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to mute myself so you can introduce yourself and talk about your topic and take it away. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for caring enough to, know that this topic means a lot to me and this space means the world to me. So I'm excited. First, I got to start off by giving a shout out to all the other presenters, the ones I've seen, the ones I'll catch on the recordings. Of course, Anthony Palmer, who's going to get us all the way together with our looks, all the way together. And Ali Guma, I mean, starting out from the meaning of her name, I was just mesmerized and stunned from that. So but it was wonderful to see so much wisdom, being imparted on women of color in the space, because so often women will come to me and say, who can I ask about this? Or who else can tell me about this? Who can give me guidance? And particularly in fundraising, it's really tough to find. So it was just wonderful. And my heart was warmed to hear that. So thank you for that. Thank you for being a part of my personal story, my career journey, Kishana. So I'm excited. We're going to talk about resumes tonight. Let me say that the reason I like to talk about this topic because I feel like throughout the Rooted Collaborative, we're going to go deep on career things. And I wanted to start at the beginning. I feel like this could be the beginning of a multi-part series where we're touching on the different pieces of the career journey. But I wanted to just talk about resumes because I know that with fundraising especially, there's a lot, you have to apply. You're on the market a lot. There's more movement than in other roles, than in other functions. And so you have to constantly be thinking about, how am I putting my best foot forward? What's the best representation of me in the market? And that's why we called it, what your resume says about you. I'm going to try to give you the insider version. It's going to be straight, no chaser. It's after 8 o'clock on the East Coast. I'm going to be a little unfiltered. I'm going to give you the sister girlfriend version because Kashana knows that so much of my work that I do, I think my journey, my personal journey has been so much of it has been about being a woman of color recruiter, and how do I find ways to help other women tell their story and get noticed and be understood by panels of people who don't look like us. And that is not easy. And it can be daunting and exhausting. But what I appreciate is that even when, interview committee will tell you no, I can say, here's why, and here's what we're going to do. And that's really how I became a coach outside of being a recruiter, is saying, here's what I heard in the room. You know what, I'm going to take that, I'm going to give it to you so directly, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do to then get where you need to be. So next time, that no is not going to be a no, it's going to be a yes. And sometimes just being in the room where it happens, you hear things, you hear, how these candidates aren't polished or not strategic enough. And it took me a little while in my career. I had to get some, titles under me to be able to say, wait, what do you mean by that? Say more about that. What does polished mean? And call it out as a microaggression. Call it out as, assumptive. Call it out as stereotypical. Call it out as bias. And so much of my work is wrapped up into those experiences, and that's why I'm excited to be with you all tonight. So a little bit about what I really do in my day job. I am an executive recruiter and human capital consultant. I work at a company called Koya Leadership Partners. We are a mission-driven we're an executive search firm for mission-driven organizations. So our clients are all nonprofit, mission-driven organizations. I've been there 8 years. I've had a variety of roles. Right now, I spend half of my time on the search side, really doing high-level searches for nonprofits across the country. And then half my time I do human capital consulting projects for nonprofits across the country, small, large, different sectors, primarily education. I grew up as a practitioner in education. That's where I met Kashana originally. Being internal to a role, to an organization in education and ed reform, where my heart lies. But now I'd say it's more so education, social justice, advocacy, and also some environment, and even some international relief, which has been interesting now given what we're going through today. So that's what I do in my day job. So it is fair to say that I've seen thousands of resumes, and I've made lots of decisions about the who and the what and the why. But also I checked with a lot of my recruiter friends. I checked with my recruiters who are of different colors, who don't necessarily look like any of us. And I'd asked for what advice they should give, particularly my recruiter friends who do a lot of fundraising recruiting, because it is a little bit of a different beast. So that's really where all of my advice comes from. I'm hoping that I can give you a little something, but then it can be more interactive, and I can ask some of your questions that you may have always wanted to ask, or that are on your mind right now. And I'm willing to take any of those questions and try to answer them the best I can. Okay. So let me pause. We good so far, Shauna? Good? Okay.
We're good so far. Let me see if I can go to the chat really quick. Where did the chat go? Okay, hold on. Oh, here we are. No, we welcome that. You indicated, which is truth, that there's lots of movement. That's what we need. Thank you. So folks are just in agreement right now. And Jacqueline wants to know, well, how do you make that work to your advantage? Jacqueline, say more on that. I just want to make sure that we're following the thread of the question, because I'm repeating back what I hear for the recording. Might just give her a second. Let's see if she'll type in.
I imagine it's about using the fact that people move a lot. So,
yeah.
While we're waiting for an answer, oftentimes a hiring manager will look at a resume and say, "Oh, they moved too much. Move it aside. Next." Actually, I spend a lot of time telling clients, "Wait." In fundraising, that is more the norm than not. You'll find that fundraisers will spend 18 to 24 months in a position, and they'll have a track record of success. And if they're worth their salt, they will get recruited out of that role to do something else, or they'll set their sights on larger targets, larger fundraising goals, larger things. So you use that to your ability. The key there, Jacqueline and everybody else, is to be able to tell the story. help people understand your why. Because if you left one role and then went to another where the fundraising goal was smaller or the target market was smaller, help people understand, is that going backwards? There may be something there, and you have to be able to own it, lean into it, and tell that story. We're going to talk a little bit about telling your story, but that is a really good question. I get that often, all the time from fundraisers, especially.
No, she said you hit it right on the head because it feels like a.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad. Okay. So let me start with, just some common things. Again, a lot of this may not be rocket science, but I just want to I want to go over it to keep it top of mind when you think about resumes. Ali Guma stole some of this, stole my thunder on some of this, but it was great the way she put it. Her graphic was perfect. I got to co-sign everything she said, where she has talked about, at bottom line is it has to be mistake-free. That may seem like, it's funny. I talked to a lot of hiring managers who say, well, what if I really am interested and I see one little mistake? Shouldn't I give them a chance to recoup from that? That may be the case, but that's the exception versus the norm. The norm is a hiring manager is going to say, you know what, they didn't take the time to review it, or they didn't take the time to have it reviewed. This is when you call on your kitchen cabinet. This is when you call on your friends. This is when you call on that person who is always like the go-to in the crew to write something, edit something, read something. Have them look at it and say, tell me what jumps out to you. Look for the mistakes. Grammarly, there's no excuse for there to be grammar mistakes in a resume. People will call that out as your lack of attention to detail. And honestly, you are all too good for that. I know enough about a lot of your backgrounds to know you are all too good for that, to get dinged on a little mistake in your resume. So please take the time to make sure you look it over. But when you're too close to it, you miss some of that. You miss like the little mistakes because it's in your head rather than on the paper. Have your friends, have somebody else, have someone who's actually not your friend, but who's just an associate, read it and give you feedback, because oftentimes that's when you get the most unfiltered feedback on those. I think Ali Guma said this. She said mistake-free, easy to read. It has to be digestible. I am a very visual person. And so for me, visually easy to digest is, it has to be symmetrical, and there has to be enough white space. If every little piece of this page is filled because you're trying to utilize more space than you need to, you're trying to make the margin smaller, and you're trying to condense your however many years of experience onto 2 pages because you feel like you don't want to go on to 3, we're going to know that. You have to make some judgment calls around what's the substance that really deserves to be on this resume right now, and then govern yourself accordingly with how you utilize the space. But if you don't give me some white space or some places to give the visual balance, it can be really tough to digest. And on average, this is, recruiters will say different things, but on average, recruiters will spend 1 minute to 2 minutes. 2 minutes actually is a long time to spend on a resume. But if you're thinking somebody's spending 60 seconds on your resume, how do you make sure that it is visually appealing enough that they focus on the substance rather than on the format and some of the things that may be a little bit wonky and harsh on the eyes? So just make it mistake-free, easy to read, making sure that it's metric driven, that it has numbers, but the numbers aren't just your tasks. It's not just what you did. It's not just your responsibilities. That can be that's going to come from your job description. We can find that somewhere. You can tell me that when you sit across from me and I ask you what you did. What I want to know is what are your accomplishments? What did your results lead to? What was the impact you had on the organization, the people, the culture, and the sector that you're coming from? What is that impact? And you have to be able to quantify that. If you can't quantify it to put on your resume, that's where you take some of those things and you incorporate that into your story. So there's the resume that gives you the written story, and then you're going to be able to tell your story on top of that. And together, that should be your powerful presentation of who you are in your most authentic self as this, VP of, individual giving, as this chief development officer, whatever it may be. Okay. In terms of length of the resume, again, there's different opinions. I would say on average, most of us should be able to get away with a 2-page resume. For example, most of mine can fit on 2 pages, even though I've been in the game for over 20 years. Yes, I'm old, y'all. But I reduced it to 2 pages because there's some things that I left out. Yes, I worked at Chess King in the mall when I was a teenager, but didn't need to see that on my resume. Leave that out. There's some things that are less important to that specific role I'm applying for or that opportunity where you can leave it out. And do not be afraid to have different versions of your resume. Do not be afraid to make sure that, you're taking the opportunity that you have and you're ensuring that the resume is reflective of why you want to do that, what you want to do in that opportunity, and then making sure it's catering to that particular opportunity. So to get back to the topic, we said the topic is going to be, what does your resume say about you? If there are mistakes, if it is not easy to read, it's going to say that you're not, being attentive to detail. It's going to say that you didn't take the time. It's going to say that you didn't care enough about this opportunity. You're not interested enough. That may be all wrong. That may be completely misread, because you really may be excited. This may be your dream job. But if your resume says something otherwise, then you've already derailed yourself from the point of entry. And so you really need to make sure that you do all those things on the front end to ensure that you're giving a really clean, perfectly worded, or at least really visually pleasing resume on the outset. Okay. I'm going to keep going because I want to get to the question part. Things to think of.
Rolling.
If you lack action verbs, what that says to me is, oh, she's either never done it or she's afraid to own her experience and say it. And I'll get to that in a second. But if it doesn't have the action verbs that said, I planned, implemented, created, developed, envisioned. If I don't have any of those action words, then I'm thinking, oh, that she hasn't led at the highest levels, or she hasn't, really functioned at the highest levels of leadership. I've managed, blah, blah, blah. If it doesn't have those action verbs, those are the right keywords I'm looking for, we can assume that, she's not as senior as we think she is, even if her title indicates otherwise. So make sure your verbs reflect what you've done. Make sure that is accurate. The other side of that, as I said, people assume that if they don't have they don't see those verbs, that you either didn't do it, you don't have that experience, or you're afraid to own it. I want to talk about that a little bit. Every recruiter I asked about, advice for fundraisers, particularly female fundraisers. I didn't say women of color. I got to that afterwards. I asked them, what's your best piece of advice? They said, all too often, women fundraisers are afraid to promote themselves, are afraid to own their experiences, are afraid to actually quantify what they've done. And if I want you all to picture like that really pompous, arrogant, more than likely male boss that you've all worked for or been around at some point. Everybody writes their resume thinking, I don't want to be him. So you write it in a way that kind of almost downplays what you've done. You almost kind of use words that purposely, you don't want to seem like you're being too arrogant. You think you're too full of yourself, or you're too fill in the blank, right? But on the same token, if you don't use those words, if you don't own that, then you really are allowing someone else to steal your thunder, because no matter who it is, the next resume, if they own it, if they say, oh, I've done this, I can do that, oftentimes you have to use your resume to get in the door. And then when you sit in that chair, it's your time to shine. And Kashana I think you remember this. I've said this to you probably about 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Your resume can get you in the door, but when you sit down and you answer the questions, that's you giving them you. Nobody can be you. Nobody can interview and be you. Not one. Everybody, you are your own person. You are bringing your own story, your own experiences, your own authentic selves. Nobody can replace you in that seat. If that seat was meant for you, you're going to get it. Okay. But you have to lean into it. You have to own it. You have to not be afraid to say, yes, I did that. And in the same way you say, yes, I did that. And yes, these are all the verbs. You have to be able to say, you know what? Sometimes this didn't work. I failed at that. Some of the best hires I've ever made personally for my own team are people who answer the question around, what have your failures taught you? What have you learned? What was the worst failure? What was the most embarrassing thing you've ever experienced? And the way people bounce back from that tells more about their character than any of those other verbs that we talked about, right? So don't be afraid to have the other side of the coin. Like, I did this, I did all these things. At the same time, here's all the things I attempted that didn't work, or didn't work the first time, or I wasn't ready. One of the best things I ever did was in an interview, I said, you know what? I'm not ready for this job. And I realized it during the interview process, and I backed out. Don't you know, a few years later, that same hiring manager was at a different place and said, I think you're ready. And I said, you know what? I am. I think I am too. Let's do this. And so that can be what takes you from, being or not afraid to own in a moment that you're not ready, or that you need to learn something. Being constructively critical of your own self will maybe position you to step into something later on. But you have to be able to tell a full holistic story. And that includes the things you've done and the things that you haven't done yet, or you haven't done well. And that's okay. We're not expecting perfection. I'm expecting honesty more than above all else. I'm expecting honesty. Let me pause there. I'm slipping into my Boston roots and starting to talk real fast.
Yeah,
So
but I love it.
uh,
Can you see the comments, Maya, when you click at the bottom?
I just opened it up. So
Okay.
sorry, my hypothetical Brad and Chad. Oh yes, we all know a Brad. We all know him. And oftentimes we are telling our stories to be a counterpoint to Brad. Don't do that. Don't let Brad steal your energy. Don't let him steal your joy. Don't let him dictate your story. Okay. But so often we're doing that, whether we know it or not. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, got some Boston Energy 617 stand up. Yes, yes, all day. Grew up in Mattapan. Pause for the pan, y'all. What else do we have? Keep telling myself I need to walk through life with confidence of a mediocre white man named Bill. Yes. So I'm trying to scroll. I'm trying to keep up fast. And y'all type it fast, y'all. Okay. All right. Thank you. It seems like this is resonating with a lot of you, and that is exactly what I was hoping. So I'm glad. Let me touch on a few other things, and I'm going to open it up if that's okay. So oftentimes, so back to what I asked my other recruiters is they said, not owning what you've done and not being willing to promote yourself. The other thing is sometimes I don't see you in the story. And this is related. So sometimes if we're asking you to tell your story, and this is, I'm going to actually answer the question about the cover letter. Someone asked in the last session about a cover letter, so we held it over for this session. The cover letter should tell me the thing that I can't tell from the resume. It should fill in the blanks. It should tell me that story, but nothing else. It should answer for me why. Why is this the right role for her? And why is this the right role now? What is it about this role versus anything else on this earth that this is drawing them? It's compelling them. This is your must have. Tell me that story in the cover letter. I mean, some of the other stuff people put in cover letters, we just gloss over it, but I need to know why this role, why now? And sometimes, and I've done this, I've told people your why tells me that you're looking for something else. This is not the role for you right now. And we have to be willing to tell that to people we care about or people we want to see be successful. This is that your why says you want something else. You don't want to do individual giving. You have no interest. Okay, that's not what you want. No. Oh, I got a question about a cover letter. How many pages should a cover letter be? Great question. I would not make it more than a page. For those of you who have been maybe in higher ed or have been in other places who want a CV, you may be traditionally prone to having a longer cover letter. Do not have more than one page. As a matter of fact, give me a good margin at the bottom and give me a good header at the top. It should be two or three really good paragraphs, and that's it. It should not go from top of the page from top of the page to the bottom of the page. You should have some margin space at either end, and be that one page. That's long enough for you to tell me why. That's long enough for you to hone in on the what. Otherwise, you're starting to get into your responsibilities and the things you've done and all the competencies that you have. I'm going to glean that from the resume. But right now, I want you to fill in the parts of your story that are so compelling that I need to know right now to let you in this door and sit across from me or sit on the Zoom with me, because that's what we're doing these days. Okay, that is a great question. Okay, so we were talking about, telling your story. I think one of the biggest things that resumes don't do, what your resume says about you, is that, you don't necessarily have a connection to the work, or maybe you do have a connection to the work. Some of the best resumes show me why it's important to you to be in this space. For mission-driven nonprofit organizations, it's really important for me to know quickly why this space is important to you. My story always started with, I'm in education because I was a girl who grew up in the city, in the inner city, around the way, and I left to go to boarding school because right at that time, my mother felt like she had no other options. I wanted to change the face of education so that kids didn't have to make that choice to leave their families and grow up outside of their homes. Granted, I got a great education. It was wonderful, and I made lifelong friends, but if I had other choices, would I do it differently? My mom probably would. Just full stop. So what is it that's compelling you to this mission, this cause? Why are you so interested in the women and girls advocacy? Why is social justice your thing? Is it, did you just get woke? Have you always been woke? What is it? Tell me the story, and not being afraid to tell me. I think sometimes we filter the story thinking, oh, I'm sitting here talking to a panel of white people. I'm not going to tell them the full unedited version. Actually, you know what? Tell your story, because at the end of the day, if they hire you, it's going to come out. So you might as well have it out from the beginning. Some recruiters may not agree with me with that on that one. But I feel like we're too old to play games with our careers. We're too old to play games with things that do not give us joy, that do not really fulfill us. And so tell us who you are from the jump so we can make a fully informed decision as to what, whether or not we're going to hire you. And some of you may be saying, well, they're not going to hire me if I give them full, unedited, unfiltered, blackness, well, actually, you may find that out 6 months from getting hired that they weren't ready for you anyway. So I'd rather them tell you at the onset. It's much better for you in terms of your emotional, your psychological safety and wellness to get that no early on rather than 6 to 9 months. And then, many people call me and say, I've been here 6 months. It's not the right fit. Can I leave without damaging my resume? Will that, mess up my flow? Will I have to explain it? I always feel like 6 months or less, you can leave it off your resume. You can always explain that you took time off, you took a pause. You can explain it in a way. Longer than that, you need to fill in some blanks. You need to help me understand, why did it take you 6 months not to realize that they was crazy? Like, why did it take you longer to realize that this really wasn't a good fit when you knew from day one it didn't feel right? It was not for you, because you know what? That they did not respect and honor who you were and who you needed to be in your role. So that's definitely something I would advise you to think about, is how much, of your honest self you can be, and how willing are you to be that from the jump, from beginning. Okay. Hold on to make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. Okay. I think I covered. Okay. Great. So a couple of other things, two more things I want to touch on, then I'm gonna open up and see if you have questions, is, your resume is, kind of now it's an indication of who you are. Some people, some organizations and companies aren't even using resumes. They can write to you on LinkedIn. So if your resume and your LinkedIn don't tell the same story, that's a problem. You have to make sure that your social media presence reflects what you want it to reflect. So if you're going to get on the market, if you're going to start a job, do a full audit of your social media. Create different social media accounts and handles for your professional self. If you feel like your personal self isn't what you wanted to see from so early on, because they may have they may misinterpret your character or what have you. Or make those really private so people can't get to it. Recruiters legally aren't supposed to, but I'm not gonna lie to you all, they all do it. They will all do a Google search. They will all look at your social media, and they will make assessments of what that means, whether you are aligned or not aligned with their values, whether you are aligned or not aligned with their brand, things like that. So make sure that your resume and your social media really do align if you're fully on the market. Because like I said, some organizations don't want, they also on a resume, they say, let me just send me their name. I want to look them up on LinkedIn and I want to see for myself. And so that's why being on LinkedIn is important. I had a fundraiser recently who was not on LinkedIn, and the client and I'm not gonna lie, the client and myself, we questioned really like how they must be a little out of touch, because if you're not on LinkedIn, and you're fundraising or you're doing anything that involves connection, relationships, then you need to be on LinkedIn. If you don't understand that, then it feels to me that's a judgment question. I question your judgment. And so if you're not on LinkedIn, I said, get on it and think about how the presence that you want to have on it, to complement and supplement your resume and everything else in your job search. The last thing I'll cover is side hustles. We just wrote a little, my company just did a one pager maybe on social media that talked about putting your side hustle on your resumes, and whether or not you should or shouldn't. And I'm fine with that. I think in this in this day and age, so many people have side hustles. Sometimes it's generational. A lot of the younger generations, they have something they've always done on the side. That the gig economy is really moving and integrating into kind of the regular or like full-time working economy. So it's hard to differentiate the two sometimes. So I would say if you're going to have a side hustle, like a consultancy or a business on the side, it's okay to put it on there, but it should not be confusing to me what you do at this moment. I should be able to understand like what the time frame is. I should be able to see kind of, oh, you have a full-time job, but this particular consultancy that you have that's lasted for a long time, you founded it and you kept it throughout various jobs, and you are going to, and it's sustaining you, through, whatever job you have. If they're related or if they complement one another, that's always a really good thing. It's good when you can see that they kind of work together, but it can be totally off on the side. If you own a flower business, but you also want to be a fundraiser, just help me to understand how they work together, what you have learned. Sometimes being an entrepreneur can be the best experience ever, versus just being a fill in the blank, whatever you are functionally in your day job. Okay. And I'm sorry, here comes my 4-year-old, y'all. I'm so sorry. No, out. Out, no, out. Sorry. So come get your girls, Kashana, come get your girls. So I think someone asked, could they leave a side hustle off? Is it okay? Yes, it is okay to leave your side hustle off. It's totally okay. That's up to you. That is totally okay for you to leave it off. If it's easy to find, though, if you have your own website and I can find you, I'm going to ask you, or assume that, I'm going to, I'm going to wonder. And the key is to ensure that there's no big questions that you're leaving out there because of your resume or how your resume doesn't work with your social media or something else that we can find out there. Answer the big questions so that we're not left with those, which could really be, it could infiltrate the way we make a decision or our assessment of you. So make sure you do that. How closely do you look? I do not look at endorsements. I'm going to be honest. I do not look at endorsements on LinkedIn at all. You know why? Because when I see them, I often click, oh, yes, 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 without actually putting a lot of thought into, can this person do that? I will look at the recommendations, though. I will read those word for word. And I will look and see if I know this person. I will look and see if this person was a senior level person in the organization. I will look and see what their role was, how they may have interacted. Those are more important to me than endorsements. Endorsements is great to see them in number. It'll be great to see maybe, everyone says this person's a good project manager. That's great. But I feel like it's too easy for people to click yes and endorse you, than it is for them to actually write a recommendation. Those have much more weight. And so Gloria is asking how are recommendations? Yes, definitely. And I would say, if you don't have any recommendations, this is what you do. You write somebody a recommendation. Week later and say, would you mind writing me one? Remember that project we did remember we led the DEI initiative. Remember we did this. We helped jog someone's memory so that they're like, oh yeah, and I have lots to say about them. They did, it was great working with them. Help them understand what you want to see in that recommendation, what will be valuable to you. You don't have to write it. They probably have enough substance, but the recommendation is much more valuable than the endorsements. Okay. Let me pause there. Oh, good question. Someone said, should recommendations be the same as your references for a potential job? I love it when they're not. I love it when you have people that wrote your recommendation, but then you also have references. Like, the thing about references is I want you to think about who is really going to give me the best holistic picture of you for this particular job. So you can have a different set of references for every job, if they're different, if they vary. But you shouldn't feel like, you have the same person you're asking every time you get a job. There may be one manager who you have who can speak to that. There may be that one manager who, they knew you when, and they know you now, and they can really speak to anything. But think really critically about what these people can say about you that would help you to get this particular job. Because some people say that references do not matter. As an executive recruiter, committees or hiring managers that hire us put a lot of weight in it. They also put a lot of weight in informal references, which we try not to do because I think that's a way to get jammed up really badly.
Talk about the informal references, because I feel like, particularly in the social venture space, we are really, that's the steez that's happening, but you're not a social venture fundraiser. And I love that Alabama broke it down in terms of hierarchy, but that's one of the things in ed particularly, but it's different types of social venture that we don't talk about enough. So can you just kind of clue us in and just give what that looks like and how that happens and how that can completely derail it? And if I can go one step further, I have to give you a 3-part question. I never do that. And how to know when you've been like a victim of the back channel, because you can tell when that's happening.
Yep. Great question. So informal references, you said it, they're often called back channel references. So this is when you interview for a job, you feel so good about it. You've interviewed with the hiring manager, maybe it's a committee, you've interviewed with the staff, you did a presentation, you blew them out the water. I mean, you did your thing, okay? And you feel like, you know what, I might get this. I'm feeling really good about it. The hiring manager even says, oh my God, that you're doing so well. You're like top out of two. You know what, we're just gonna do, we just have one more interview and your reference checks, and then we're gonna make a decision. And then somehow you get this little phone call. And the phone call's like, well, you know, we're going a different direction, or we decided not to, move forward with your candidacy. I will say, if you ever get that phone call, the first thing you should do is say, okay, thank you, but I'd love some feedback. I don't need it right now, but can we schedule a call for you to give me some feedback on the search? If you've gotten that far in the process, they owe it to you to give you feedback. So always, if you don't remember anything else I've said tonight, ask for the feedback. You may not want to hear it. It will behoove you to get it directly from them. If they give it to you and you can tell it is completely shallow, or it feels like it does not jive at all with what they said, it doesn't align with any of the feedback you've gotten to date from them, then you know they must have talked to someone. In education, especially, so in education reform, and I'd say this was definitely more so about 5 or 6 years ago, probably 5 to 10 years ago. The education reform phase was famous for just recycling the same candidates over and over again. So you see them in this role, then they move to this organization, they have that role, they move to another organization, they have a similar role, so just recycling. What would happen is the hiring manager would call and say, oh, you know, we used to work together at fill in the blank education organization. I will not name any names, go with an acronym. We worked together at this place. What do you think of this person that I see you worked with 3 jobs ago? And that person, they may actually think you're great, but they may not have had the most positive experience on some project or something, or they may feel some kind of way. Maybe you did something, got some kudos, and they wanted it. So much of back channel references is personally motivated. So that person would say, "Oh no, you know, I don't think they're ready for that role." And if that hiring manager puts way too much stock on that person saying that, and they feel like they're not ready to defend their decision, their own opinion, or their own insight, then they'll give you that BS, vague, shallow, lack of substance answer of, we're not going to go with you. We want to go in a different direction, but thank you. It's been great. We really like you. You'll know it when there's no substance to it. To that another part of your question, Fish, is you'll know you've been derailed by something out there that's someone said about you. If there's a lack of substance, particularly if you've developed a good rapport with the hiring manager or with the recruiter, and then all of a sudden they start to mince words. All of a sudden they start to like be really curt with, you know, it just, I don't even know what to say, you know. But before you be gabbing on the phone for hours and you have a great rapport going, but then all of a sudden they get really tight-lipped, then you know there's maybe something out there. Now, honestly, there may be something that you need to work on. My thing is, if a back channel reference comes out, like if anybody did a back channel reference on me, they would probably say, you know what, she's amazing with people. She centers people. She centers the community. She is always thinking about people. She's an empath. She is always concerned about the impact to any decision on people. Could she be a better project manager? Yes. So much of the project management happens in my head. I'm not the person, because I was talking about it earlier, that's going to give you the notes the day after the meeting with the here's what happened, here are the action items. I'm not that person. But will I get all that stuff done in my head? Yes. Do I need to communicate better out of my mouth what those things are? Probably. So I know that's out there about me. When I own that in an interview first and preempt it, but then an informal reference co-signs it, that's much better. That's actually not a bad informal reference. That's like, oh, you know what? Okay, we can work on that. It's coachable. It's moldable. This person's malleable. But there are some times when you will get derailed. And I'm going to be honest. Like sometimes I've had a client say to me, their personality was just too big. I'm worried that there's too much energy and we won't know how to contain that personality, particularly for fundraisers. If a back channel reference says, oh, they'll be great, but I can't see them interacting with your board. That can, again, it's a microaggression. Often women of color, I have had clients say, oh, her hair was distracting. Her makeup was distracting. She was great, but I just found it hard to get to the substance of her because I was so distracted. See, I'm giving you this. I'm giving you all. I got the woes going, the wows and the woes in the chat.
All
So I'm
business,
giving.
like just because clients be telling you, I'm sure tell you all type of crazy bullshit. Naima says this is so deflating. Naima, it's deflating, but honestly, Miecha is telling you a 1,000-person story, but also I am a one of that 1,000-person, having had to get that feedback. And I told you the other night the story about how I was getting an offer, package in hand, going over my health insurance. Miecha was my recruiter and had to make years and years ago and had to make the phone call to me again to say we went another way. When the offer was already done, it was a done deal. Done deal. Because one person, 14 interviews back, said I went on too long on one question in a 45-minute conversation with him. One person, 14 interviews back.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, this is real deal Holyfield. So, Miecha, talk to us about how we are able to, like, really leverage that. Because you taught me how to really kind of get in and you just started talking about it. Name things up front. Go in there,
Yes.
expanding your profile. Self-awareness is key. So, talk to us.
Yes. And I will say this advice works not just for a new job or new organization. It works when you're talking to your manager. So remember that this isn't just about a new job outside. This is that promotion internally. When you're able to name the thing and say the hard thing about yourself, you're preempting anybody from hurting your feelings with it. Take that power back, ladies. Take it back. Say, yeah, I could be a better project manager. I could communicate better. But you know what I do really well? Here's what I do really well. And here's proof of that. And here are some people who will co-sign that or who will confirm that. So like really stepping into, okay, I probably need to do this better, or really owning what you don't do well. One question I say you should always prepare for is the question of, if I were to read your past reviews, what will people say you did well and what will people say you didn't do so well? And don't give me that shallow, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a Virgo. I live to be a perfectionist. But you know what? There's a whole lot of other stuff I could do better too. You got to go deeper. You got to get real specific. Like, here are the things that I need to do better. Here are my top 3 skills, but here are the competencies that, you know what, I need some. I probably could use some uh, time or experience, or I could just do more and get better, get deeper. But also, here's some ways that I've stepped into that and tried to get better. Here's some of the ways I'm working on that. I'm working with a coach, or I took on this project that felt really tough. It felt really outside my sweet spot, outside my bailiwick, but I'm sitting as number 2 on this project, and here's what I'm learning. And I'm trying to counter the fact that this competency is not necessarily one of my top 3. I'm owning that and I'm stepping into that. When you do that, when you preempt, but the preemptive strike is one of the most powerful things in the world in an interview. When you give them the preemptive strike, when you own the thing that you know they're going to try to use against you. Okay. I mean, as an example, I do it personally. I shouldn't. My friends tell me not to. I always do the preemptive strike about my weight. I always got to say a joke about my weight so people don't say anything that can make me feel some kind of way about it. But I stopped doing that because, you know what, I had to get comfortable with, you know what, yeah, this is who I am and how I am, and I'm good with me. So I could be a better project manager, but I'm good with me enough to know that if you don't hire me, you're going to be missing out on all these other things about me that you could benefit from. And here's what they are. Here's how they align with the job description. Nothing is actually better than preparation. If you're prepared for a job, if you're prepared for a job interview, you can go in there and wow them with the level of and the depth of your preparation. That can actually negate any of the stuff that they may hear outside of that interview. Or somebody may say, oh, I heard this from an informal reference, but that was 6 years ago. What did they know? She's probably had time to grow. And did you see everything she said when she sat across and she owned this and she led with, here's a lesson I've learned in the past. One thing someone said earlier, I think it was Ellie Gouman, that talked about asking people for some of that criticism, asking for the constructive feedback. That's one thing you can do, is you ask for it and then find a way to integrate that into your story, into your growth trajectory, into your growth plan. Having a plan where you're trying to grow and compensate for your deficits is a very mature thing to do, again, with your manager and with anybody with any new organization or new company. Let me pause there and see if that's making sense and if there's any follow-ups to that, because I know that's a really it's a tough one. And it's one reason why I got into coaching. It's one reason I got into thinking about how do I help executives to get past some of that, which feels like it's so out of their control. And some of it is, and some of it will be, but there's some things you can do to really help mitigate the impact that some of that negative stuff will have on you. So I got it. My serious, straightforward personality seen as threatening, especially as a woman of color. Yep, people tell me they feel threatened, but I'm not intending. What I hear you saying is to preempt that. Yes, and I've had to coach. I've had to coach people on that. Tell people. You know what? Some people are taken aback by my direct style. Give an example. One, I was in a staff meeting and I said this to my staff, and they were all, but here's what I meant, and here's what I did to make sure they understood that I wasn't being threatening. I was, just preparing them for worst case scenario. I have a tendency to be more direct and honest, and I say the hard thing so that we can deal with that and get to the work. And it's not the elephant in the room that we're dancing around. So preempting that in a way that shows how comfortable you are with what people have said about you, what people have, how they describe you, is a beautiful thing. It shows professional. I'm going to sit there and say there's professional maturity. There is, a sense of self-awareness. And there is also an honesty and authenticity about this person that I want to see, translate into this role.
I think what's most consistent, Maya, about what I'm hearing and what you're saying, and what I think we've been sort of saying, Rochelle has said it's around your brand, values, vision, identity. We've talked about it from different perspectives. Naima talked about it from the trajectory. She gave a really succinct, snapshot view of 18 months. And I thought that was such a powerful way to think about a season of your life that you could really be specific about. And so what you're talking about around being present, to me, says really taking some time to go deep on those examples, because we are taught to tap dance. I can't think of it any other way. And when you tap dancing, you're tap dancing on the surface. And we are taught to perform. And a lot of the work we have to do, particularly in interviews, it feels performative. And so what you're saying actually is, if you're going to be in a performance, be the star of the show. So understand your lines, understand your understudy.
Call me what you want. Call me a diva. Call me what you want.
Right.
But not call me not starring in the show that is mine. This I am. It is what it is. But that's so true. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I'm just naming that. That none of you as speakers talked to each other about your topics, and yet it has just been like Voltron coming together. And I hope folks who are listening to this live and who come back to this are really just picking up the gems, writing with your pen and paper. We've got some work to do. We got to, Tiff, Rochelle, we gotta get the drill down. Tiffany probably has all the notes over the last 4 days. It's fine. Yeah. But seriously, what you're saying, is being present is really clear. Naima has a question.
Let me, I'll answer, I'll get to that in a second. Naima, give me 1 second. I just want to say what you said about tap dancing, because sometimes we are so trained or so programmed to make others feel comfortable with our presence and who we are, that it undermines our ability to be who we really are, because we're busy trying to make everybody else comfortable. We're busy trying to make everybody else feel good. We're busy trying to make everybody else not see that we are the this, the that, whatever it is that is our thing. We're so busy trying to, make sure people get comfortable with that so then we can get started. Sometimes just actually owning that, saying that, sometimes I try to introduce myself sometimes when I'm working my practice as a DEI professional. I sometimes will, say, here's who I am, here's how I present myself, here are my pronouns. But I often will say, and I stand here as a lighter skinned Black woman, understanding my privilege as a lighter skinned Black woman. So any of those DEI people who came to this thinking we're not going to get to the colorism part of DEI, I'm sorry, I'm putting it on the table. We're not going to tap dance around that. We're not going to make you look around. Okay, well, that's a little too second level. That's a little too 301 when I want to do the 101 of DEI. This is me. This is my truth, and I know who I am enough to know that if you can't deal with that, then I'm sorry. Then I don't know if I want to be a part of this. I don't know if I want to be a part of what you're setting up. And so that's the tap dancing thing really resonates, because so often we do it to make other people feel a certain way so that we can then try to insert ourselves. But back to your question, Naima. What if you don't have the option to enroll your supervisor in your growth plan and they are the great gatekeeper to your growth within an organization? Really, really good question. I'm going to say, I have lots of thoughts off the top of my head, but the one thing that really resonated with the session before, and if you didn't see it, you should really go back and listen to the recording of Ali Guma. She really just had so much wisdom and knowledge. And I think it was just so imperative to really hear that. She talked about having a champion. I often call it a sponsor. It's not a mentor. It's not someone who is just saying, oh, this is what you should do. No, it's somebody who's willing to put their professional capital on the line to say, you know what, actually, we should choose this person. It's around the C-level table. If you don't have a seat at that table, it's around the C-level table. That person who's going to say, actually, this new project, I think Naima should have that up because here's why. She's done this, she's done that, she has this competency. They know you enough to be able to drop your competencies, drop your character, and drop your skills and experience in a conversation where you're going to be considered for something in a way that they're risking their professional capital to do that. That is one way, because that if your manager's not going to do it, hopefully your manager will, but if they're not, let's be honest, some of them don't. If they're not, then you want to have that person. If you don't have that person at the table, you have to be your best advocate. You have to find a way to say, okay, well, here's what I want to do. Here's where I want to grow. How can you help me? Sometimes you have to be that forcing mechanism for your manager and say to them, I want to move from director to vice president. How do I get there? And if they say, oh, it'll take a couple of years. Well, okay, what do I have to accomplish in those couple of years? They say, well, you have to do this, this. Okay, well, how do I get in front of this person who can help me do that? And just sometimes people be like, well, I don't want to be annoying. I don't want to be nagging. But you know what? Is your career worth it? Yes. So keep asking, push them. Push them. And, some Jacqueline said, especially if your manager is threatened by your skills, they won't do it. That is so true. Sometimes they're like, I need to make sure that I am the cat's meow on the team, that everybody looks to me as a leader. But any good manager knows that they are managing to replace themselves. I want somebody to come and replace me. I want somebody to take my job. I want to have them ready to do my job and do it better. But some people aren't ready for that position. But when you hold them accountable, one way to do that is you say in your review, or you say in your check-in, you say, oh, here's what I want to do in 2 years. And if they say, oh yeah, that'll take 2 years, send them a note. Be that person that sends the message the next day and says, per our conversation, I'm really interested in being in this. You said we could, you said this is the way to attain that. I'd really like your support, blah, blah, blah. 6 months later, go right back to that same note and say, just following up on our conversation we had 6 months ago, here's what I've accomplished in 6 months. Here's the ways that I've done this, A, B, C, and D. Here's where I want to, experience, X, Y, and Z in order to continue moving forward on that path. If you, have a record of all those conversations and you continue to push, you know what, eventually, even if they're not willing to, be your champion and be your person that says you're ready, you have proof that you tried, and their manager eventually is going to say, well, what's been going on? What's happening? And if they ask you, say, well, here's what I've done. Here's how I've advocated for myself. Not to say you're getting them in trouble, but somebody's going to ask you, you're like, well, here's what I've done. Here's all the proof in the pudding. So being diligent about pushing in a way that's appropriate, but actually accountable, holding yourself accountable to that, to advocating for yourself is really helpful. That's not an easy situation. Do not get me wrong. I don't underestimate how it is to work for a manager who is threatened by you. That's real. But there are some subtle ways that you can continue to nudge and push and move forward. Other questions?
That was so
I feel
good.
like, am I out of my time?
I mean, we had time, but still, but we people are like, I know we're just like,
Dominique had a question.
Go ahead, Dominique. She's like, hold on a minute. I got questions.
Hola. Going back to visually appealing resumes, what are your thoughts on those creative or posted resumes I just hired and feel like I was inundated that we were? So I will own the fact that I'm more of a traditionalist in that I want to see the creative resumes from creative people. So if you're in marketing and your resume isn't creative, I'm going to ding you for that.
Oh no, mine is totally lilac.
No, I'm saying if you're in marketing and it's not creative, that's what I'm saying. Sorry. If you're a marketing,
I'm
Yeah,
like,
I expect it of creatives.
yeah.
If you're like an HR person, don't hit me with the pictures and the videos and all that. Give me the substance. Give me, again, the white space. I didn't say this, the perimeter. Always think about this is how people read your resume. They go top across, down the sides. Oh wait, no, so top across, down this side, down the bottom, and up this side. So if you have your name and all that at the top, and women, stop putting your home addresses on these resumes because people are crazy. Don't do that. Take your home address off your resume. It is not necessary. I get so many that have people's home addresses. I can Google them and go show up at the doorstep like, hey, boo, don't do it. It's scary. Across the top. Then down this side should be your titles and organizations you worked for. Then down the bottom is education, associations, affiliations, all that. Up the other side is probably dates. Think about what I can get in the perimeter, and that should be easy to read, easy to understand, easy to follow. When your dates are all mixed up and they don't look organized or symmetrical, that can be a ding against you. But I care more about cleanliness and like a clean, crisp look than I do about creative, unless it's a creative role. As I get older, and the millennials and others who are more creative by nature, you're more, digitally native. I get that, but I still will err on the side of clean, concise, easy to read versus creative, unless you're a marketing professional. I hope that answered your question, Dominique.
Um, so just so you know, in creative market, this might be you said a good next level, because this is definitely like things we got to do in steps to bring folks along. But shops like Creative Market, which is like a designer's dream,
Mm-hmm.
sell, these resume templates, etc. And I have to admit that even when Rochelle did mine, I was very skittish, because I come from a world where I was like, I'm sorry, the resume is not white and gray. Like, what are we doing? Like, is there
Mm-hmm.
my photo? You want me to put my picture in? Like, I was very
Mm-hmm.
like, I can't do it. I couldn't get my mind around it. And I noticed that it was overwhelmingly what I saw as available. And so when you have professionals who are coming into our work, or who have been in their roles for a while and are looking to update and kind of, freshen up, particularly as branding becomes more
Mm-hmm.
center
Yeah.
how we
Yep.
sort of push out who we are, it's hard to know like what is and is not really acceptable
Yep.
um, when you're sending things out to folks. So I did something that was like, I run my own business now. It is professional. It has all the right words. It has the right perimeter. It has all the
Yep.
classics that I know. And then it
Mm-hmm.
has a punch to it with color. And I was like, well, if y'all don't like me, if you haven't met me yet,
That's you bringing your personality, and I love that.
but it
I
wouldn't,
love that.
but it's not going to land everywhere, right? Like if I
Mm-hmm.
was in a full on search, somebody will pull that out, and Rochelle's going to pop on and talk about it too. Somebody will pull that out and go, no, what in the heebie jeebies is happening here? You might give me a phone call as my recruiter and say, hey, this is pretty. Also, about the white one or E-Crew that we need.
Not the air crew.
So
Keep
what
taking
we
it back.
did in designing that resume, what we also did is we created it so that at a drop of a dime, it can become grayscale.
Yep. See, that is
So
important.
we have the Kashanified version, which is
Mm-hmm.
really Kashana Light, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. But we made sure that we had typography that was easy to read,
Yep.
that the rag, which is the end of the paragraphs, was not distracting, but we made it very easy to read. We paired sans serif and serif typography, guys. So that means we use
My
something like Arial
favorite.
and then something like Times New Roman in conjunction with each other. So it made it really easy on the reader's eyes, but it is also primed and prepped. So if you do something that's fun and punchy, just make sure that you have some other version that can
Yes.
easily convert to black and white or grayscale. Sorry, guys.
Rochelle, that is no sorry, no apology necessary. That's real. That's right. That's exactly right. And I
My,
appreciate that coming from a creative. Like that is right.
happy to share it real quick because I have it up just so you can see it and see what she's talking about. So I am a creative, y'all, and most of my fundraising career has been managing development and marketing verticals and comms verticals. So I'm always showing that little bit. So again, this could be easily converted to grayscale. I chose to do my perimeter a little bit differently. So it has what runs down the side, which people tend to care about for me, where I went to school, because pedigree is still a big thing, and the type of fundraising that I get
Oh yeah.
to do, how to contact me, what my skills and certifications are. So that's right up front. and how to contact me, and my professional experience is on the other side. So a little bit of a fresh take on it, but it's much more in line with what marketing professionals are doing in terms of their layout, but at the same time still has the pertinent information in that square that you told me.
Man, I see that resume.
It's really good. It's really good.
And actually,
That's
that
what
one
it
does.
is.
That one, I love it. It's easy. Again, I can digest it. It's easy on the eyes, and it gives me all the things, right? So I love it. It actually, that one is not nearly as creative as I see someday. Like I'm seeing a lot of like stripes, polka dots. Like,
okay.
That's not nearly as
Stay too far
but,
from me.
Gloria had a question. Do you have to include tech skills in the resume or cover or language is spoken? If it's relevant, Gloria, if you're applying for a role where a language will give you a heads up, give you a leg up, if by being bilingual is important to the role or important to the community served, definitely add it. If not, that's something you could tell them in the interview. That's something you can talk about during the interview. Some things you don't need to tell on the resume just yet because it's not going to be substantively, more affirming to get you in the door. I'm sorry, the 4-year-old right here. So don't worry about putting everything on it. That's why judge the things that are critical, and then there you go, 4-year-old. And then you can get the little hands, and then you can tell the rest in your in person. Okay, it's bedtime, so she needs an ear rub to go to sleep.
I see it so much. Oh my, keep my knees. Oh my gosh. All right. Are there any other questions we have that are burning and pressing? Say, Ma, I know you wanted to close us out tonight, and I see my niece is ready to get closed out too. She's like,
yes. She's like, ma'am. Where is story time and laying in the bed? I think I just want to close out with a thought that, something that's been coming up in the sessions I've seen, and a lot of what we see on the Facebook group just coming through is so much about this is about understanding, how to use the resources around you, ladies. I can't say enough that, there's so much wisdom here, and we want to be utilized. I know you all want to be utilized. Everyone is good at something. So utilize your sisters, utilize those who are, in it, who are, who really have some wisdom to dispel upon you. So I'm just gonna let her on in. And that's okay. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to use, but also step into your own power. This is the time to raise your hand and say, you know what, I'm good at this. And I own that. Just owning who you are is so essential to not just being successful in a job. It's not just about finding the next job. It's about actually living a really happy and productive and balanced life when you own who you are and you're happy with that. And we talked a little bit before about, finding the joy in your work, finding what makes you happy in what you do. That is going to make you the most successful that you've ever been or you've ever felt, no matter what. So those are some closing thoughts from me. I appreciate all the questions. I'm sorry I got the little intruder here, but this is my life. This is who I am. I'm a mom above all else, but
this is who we are.
This is known as my 40th birthday surprise.
Yes, it was. She was.
Yes, shock and awe, ladies. Shock and awe.
Shock and awe, ladies. Shock and awe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I love it.
Thank you for having me. I am honored. Thank you
so much.